So this happened to me about 6 months ago, and I'm still processing it honestly. I was just living my normal life when these popular bloggers secretly filmed me at a cafe and turned me into their content without my permission. They edited the footage to make me look like some creepy guy bothering people, and suddenly I was getting harassed online by thousands of strangers. My coworkers started recognizing me from the viral video, and I thought my reputation was completely destroyed. But then I found the unedited footage they posted by accident, and everything changed. I managed to gather evidence of how they manipulated the situation, including screenshots of their private chat where they basically admitted to setting people up for content. The whole thing turned into this massive scandal that ended their careers instead of mine. So I'm David, 29, graphic designer. I work at this mid-sized marketing agency downtown, and honestly, I'm pretty much your average guy. I keep to myself mostly, do good work, grab lunch at the same few places near the office. Nothing exciting really happens to me, which is how I like it. I've been at this job for about 3 years now, and I have a decent routine going. I usually eat lunch at this little cafe called Brew and Bite that's maybe 2 blocks from our building. They have good sandwiches and it's never too crowded, so I can just sit and decompress for an hour before heading back to whatever project I'm working on. My coworkers are fine, but we don't really hang out outside of work much. There's Sarah who sits next to me. She's cool. And then there's Mike from the web development team, who I sometimes chat with about random stuff. Pretty standard office dynamics. I'm not really into social media that much either. I have Instagram and Facebook, but I barely post anything. I might scroll through stuff when I'm bored, but I'm definitely not one of those people who's constantly online or following influencers or whatever. I guess that's part of why what happened next caught me so off guard. I had no idea there were people out there who would just film random strangers and turn them into content for their blogs. Like, who does that? But apparently it's a whole thing now, and I was about to become their next target. It was a Tuesday in late March, and I was having my usual lunch at Brew and Bite. I'd ordered my regular turkey and Swiss sandwich and found a table near the window where I could watch people walk by while I ate. The weather was finally getting warmer, so there were more people out than usual, which was nice to see after a long winter. I was maybe halfway through my sandwich when I noticed these 2 people at a table across from me. There was a guy who looked like he was in his early 20s with perfectly styled hair and this expensive-looking camera setup, and a girl about the same age with bright pink hair who was holding what looked like a professional microphone. They had this whole production thing going on with multiple phones propped up on little tripods. At first I figured they were just doing some kind of interview or something for a school project. College students do weird stuff all the time in this area since there's a campus nearby. But then I started noticing that the guy kept pointing his camera toward other tables where people were just trying to eat their lunch. The girl would lean over and whisper something to him, and then he'd adjust the angle or zoom in on whoever they were looking at. It was starting to feel pretty invasive, honestly. There was this older woman reading a book who had no idea they were filming her, and this businessman on a phone call who definitely didn't consent to being recorded. I was getting uncomfortable just watching them do this to other people. I mean, I get that technically you can film in public spaces, but there's something really gross about secretly recording people who are just trying to have a quiet lunch. These people weren't performing or doing anything interesting. They were just existing. Then I realized the camera was pointed directly at me. The guy was definitely filming me while I was eating, and the girl was taking notes on her phone. I looked right at the camera, and the guy didn't even have the decency to look away or stop recording. He just kept going like I hadn't noticed. I felt this wave of anger wash over me. Like, who the hell did these people think they were? I wasn't doing anything worth filming. I was literally just sitting there eating a sandwich and minding my own business. But apparently that was content to them. I thought about going over and telling them to delete whatever they'd recorded of me, but honestly, I'm not great with confrontation. I figured if I just ignored them, they'd move on to someone else eventually. Plus, I only had like 15 minutes left of my lunch break, and I didn't want to spend it arguing with some wannabe influencers. So I finished my sandwich as quickly as I could and got out of there. As I was leaving, I could see them still filming, now focused on some college kids who were laughing loudly at another table. I felt bad for not saying something to warn those kids, but I just wanted to get back to work and forget about the whole thing. I had no idea that in less than 24 hours, that footage of me would be all over the internet. The next morning, I was at my desk working on a logo design when Sarah leaned over and asked if I had a twin brother or something. I told her no and asked why she was asking such a random question. She said she'd seen this video online where some guy who looked exactly like me was being weird to people at a cafe. My stomach dropped immediately. I asked her to show me what she was talking about, and she pulled up this Instagram account called City Watchers with like 200K followers. The most recent post was a video titled something like, and when I saw the thumbnail, it was definitely me. The video started with the pink-haired girl talking to the camera about how they were just trying to enjoy lunch when this strange man started making everyone uncomfortable. Then it cut to footage of me at my table, but it was edited in this really manipulative way. They'd cut out all the parts where I was just eating normally and only showed moments where I happened to look up or glance around the room. They made it look like I was intensely staring at women and being predatory. There was this part where I looked toward the counter to see if my order was ready, but the way they edited it made it seem like I was leering at the female barista. Then there was another part where I checked my phone, but they cropped it so you couldn't see the phone, and it just looked like I was staring at nothing with this blank expression. The worst part was the commentary. The girl was doing this voiceover talking about how uncomfortable I was making everyone and how men like me ruin public spaces for women. She said I was clearly targeting female customers and that someone should have called security. None of that was true at all, but the way they edited the footage made it look completely believable. The video had already gotten like 50,000 views and hundreds of comments. People were calling me disgusting and creepy and saying I looked like a predator. Someone had even made a joke about how I probably had bodies buried in my basement. The comments were absolutely brutal, and they were all based on this completely false narrative these bloggers had created. I felt sick reading through them. These were real people saying horrible things about me based on manipulated footage. Some of the comments were talking about how they'd seen guys like me before and sharing their own stories about being harassed. I felt terrible that these women had those experiences, but I wasn't the person they thought I was. Sarah could see how upset I was getting, and she asked if it was really me in the video. I told her yes, but that it wasn't what it looked like at all. I explained how these people had been secretly filming everyone in the cafe and that they'd edited the footage to make me look bad. She seemed to believe me, but I could tell she was a little unsure. By lunchtime, Mike from web development had seen it too. He came over to my desk and asked if I was okay, because people were sharing the video on Twitter and Reddit now. He said his girlfriend had sent it to him asking if he knew this creep from work. The whole thing was spiraling completely out of control. I spent the rest of the day feeling paranoid that everyone was looking at me differently. Even though Sarah and Mike seemed supportive, I couldn't shake the feeling that other co-workers might have seen the video and believed what it was saying about me. I barely got any work done because I kept checking my phone to see how much worse it was getting online. Over the next few days, the video kept spreading. It got picked up by some larger accounts and even made it onto a few of those Instagram pages that just repost viral content. Every time I thought it might be dying down, it would pop up somewhere new with thousands more views and comments. The bloggers had posted a follow-up video too, where they talked about the importance of calling out creepy behavior and how women need to look out for each other in public spaces. They positioned themselves as these heroes who were protecting people from guys like me. It was infuriating because they were using a completely fabricated situation to build their brand and get more followers. I tried commenting on their posts to explain my side of the story, but my comments kept getting deleted within minutes. Other people who tried to point out that the editing seemed suspicious also had their comments removed. It was clear that they were controlling the narrative by only allowing comments that supported their version of events. I was losing sleep over this whole thing. Every time I went anywhere in public, I felt like people might recognize me from the video. I started avoiding the cafe completely and eating lunch at my desk instead. My work was suffering because I couldn't focus on anything except this situation that was completely out of my control. Then on Friday, I was doing some research to see if there was any way to get the video taken down when I found something interesting. The original bloggers had posted a longer version of their cafe visit on their YouTube channel, and they'd apparently forgotten to edit out some of the footage that contradicted their Instagram story. In this longer video, you could see the full context of what actually happened. It showed them setting up their equipment and talking about how they were going to film people without permission to create content about. You could see me notice their camera and look uncomfortable about being filmed. Most importantly, it showed that I wasn't staring at anyone inappropriately at all. The unedited footage proved that they'd completely manipulated the situation. They'd taken normal, innocent moments and edited them together to create a false narrative. I wasn't being creepy or predatory. I was just a guy trying to eat lunch who happened to notice that some strangers were filming me without consent. I immediately downloaded the video in case they realized their mistake and took it down. This was the evidence I needed to prove that they'd lied about what happened, but I wasn't sure what to do with it yet. I knew that just posting it myself probably wouldn't be enough to undo all the damage they'd already done. I needed to figure out a way to make sure people would actually see the truth and understand how they'd been manipulated. These bloggers had built their following by exploiting and lying about regular people, and I was determined to expose them for what they really were. That weekend, I went over to my friend Jake's apartment to get his advice on the whole situation. Jake works in digital marketing, so he understands how online content spreads and how to deal with social media crises. I brought my laptop and showed him both versions of the video, so he could see the difference. Jake was immediately outraged when he saw how they'd edited the footage. He said it was one of the most blatant examples of manipulation he'd ever seen, and that what they did was probably illegal in some way. He suggested that I should definitely pursue some kind of legal action, but first we needed to gather as much evidence as possible. We spent hours going through the bloggers' social media accounts and website to see if we could find other examples of them doing this to people. It turned out that secretly filming strangers and creating dramatic narratives about them was basically their entire brand. They had dozens of videos where they'd target random people and turn them into villains for content. Jake found some really disturbing stuff in their older posts. There were videos where they'd filmed homeless people and made fun of them, content where they'd recorded people having what looked like mental health episodes, and multiple instances where they'd created false stories about people being rude or aggressive when the footage clearly showed otherwise. While we were researching, Jake got a notification on his phone from someone in a Facebook group he's part of. Apparently, someone had posted screenshots of a private group chat where the bloggers were bragging about how easy it was to manipulate footage to create viral content. The person who leaked the screenshots said they used to work with these bloggers but quit because they were uncomfortable with their methods. The screenshots were incredible. In their private chat, the bloggers talked about specifically targeting people who looked like they wouldn't fight back or defend themselves online. They discussed how to edit footage to make innocent behavior look suspicious or threatening. Most damning of all, they joked about how gullible their audience was and how easy it was to get people outraged over completely fabricated situations. One of the messages specifically mentioned my video. The pink-haired girl had written something about how that was perfect because he looked like a stereotypical creep even though he hadn't actually done anything wrong. They talked about which clips to use and how to frame the narrative to get the most engagement. Jake immediately took screenshots of everything before the original poster could delete them. He said this was exactly what we needed to expose these people for who they really were. The private chat messages proved that they knew they were lying about me and that they'd done it intentionally to build their following. We started planning how to release all this evidence in a way that would actually reach people and undo the damage they'd done to my reputation. Jake suggested coordinating the release across multiple platforms simultaneously so they couldn't delete everything before people saw it. He also thought we should reach out to some larger accounts that focus on exposing fake content and manipulation. By the end of the day, we had a solid plan for how to fight back against these bloggers and show everyone the truth about what they'd done to me and probably countless other people. On Monday morning, I took a long lunch break and went to see a lawyer that Jake had recommended. Her name was Lisa Chun, and she specialized in cases involving online harassment and defamation. I brought printouts of all the evidence we'd gathered and explained the whole situation from the beginning. Lisa listened to everything and then spent some time reviewing the screenshots and comparing the two versions of the video. She said I definitely had grounds for a defamation lawsuit since the bloggers had knowingly published false information that damaged my reputation. She also thought there might be privacy violations involved since they'd filmed me without consent and used the footage commercially. The problem was that pursuing legal action would be expensive and time-consuming, and there was no guarantee that I'd be able to collect any damages even if I won. These bloggers probably didn't have significant assets, and they could just declare bankruptcy or disappear if they faced a large judgment against them. Lisa suggested that the most effective approach might be to expose them publicly first and then pursue legal action if necessary. She said that if we could get their audience to turn against them by revealing the truth, it would destroy their ability to make money from this kind of content and serve as a deterrent to other people who might try similar tactics. She helped me draft a comprehensive post that laid out exactly what had happened, with links to all the evidence we'd gathered. The post explained how the bloggers had manipulated the footage, included screenshots of their private chat admissions, and provided the unedited video that showed the truth about what actually occurred at the cafe. Lisa also suggested that we time the release to coincide with one of their live streams, when their audience would be most engaged and likely to see our response. She said the key was to make sure the evidence was undeniable and presented in a way that would be easy for people to understand and share. We decided to create accounts on multiple platforms and post the evidence simultaneously, then reach out to bigger accounts and journalists who might be interested in covering the story. Lisa said that once the truth was out there, the bloggers would have a hard time controlling the narrative the way they had before. The plan was to wait until their next scheduled live stream, which was supposed to happen that Friday evening. That would give us time to prepare everything and make sure we had backup copies of all the evidence in case they tried to get anything taken down. I left the lawyer's office feeling more hopeful than I had since this whole thing started. Finally, I had a real plan for fighting back and clearing my name, instead of just sitting there helplessly while these people destroyed my reputation for their own profit. Friday evening came and the bloggers went live on Instagram like they did every week. Jake and I were watching from his apartment, waiting for the right moment to release everything. They were doing their usual thing, talking about their recent videos and interacting with viewers in the chat. About 20 minutes into the stream, someone in the chat asked them about the video and whether they ever worried about filming people without permission. The pink-haired girl laughed and said they only filmed in public spaces where there was no expectation of privacy, and that if people didn't want to be filmed, they shouldn't act weird in public. Her response made me furious because she knew exactly what she'd done and she was still lying about it to her audience. The male blogger chimed in and said that people who complain about being filmed usually have something to hide, and that they were providing a public service by calling out inappropriate behavior. That was our cue. Jake and I simultaneously posted the evidence across multiple platforms. I posted on Reddit with the title and included all the screenshots, both versions of the video, and a detailed explanation of what had happened. Jake posted similar content on Twitter and sent it to several larger accounts that he knew would be interested in the story. We also posted in Facebook groups and on Instagram, making sure to tag the bloggers so their followers would see our posts. Within minutes, people started finding our evidence and sharing it. The comments on the live stream began changing as viewers realized they'd been lied to. People started asking the bloggers to respond to the allegations and explain why they'd edited the footage so deceptively. At first, the bloggers tried to ignore what was happening and continue with their regular stream content. But the chat was filling up with people demanding answers and sharing links to our posts. You could see them getting increasingly uncomfortable as they realized they were losing control of the situation. Finally, the male blogger addressed it directly. He said that disgruntled subjects of their videos sometimes tried to spread lies and manipulate evidence to make themselves look better. He claimed that our screenshots were fake and that the unedited footage had been doctored somehow. But it was too late. Too many people had already seen the evidence and could judge for themselves what was real and what wasn't. The private chat screenshots were particularly damning because they showed the bloggers' true attitudes toward their audience and their willingness to fabricate content for views. The live stream chat became completely hostile toward the bloggers. Their own followers were turning against them as they realized how they'd been manipulated and used. People were sharing stories about other videos where they now suspected the bloggers had lied or exaggerated situations. The bloggers ended their live stream abruptly after about an hour of trying to defend themselves unsuccessfully. But by then it was too late to contain the damage. Our evidence posts were being shared rapidly across all platforms and getting thousands of views and comments. The story was picked up by several larger accounts that focus on exposing fake content and online manipulation. A Twitter account with over 500,000 followers posted a thread breaking down exactly how the bloggers had edited my footage deceptively, and it got retweeted thousands of times within hours. Reddit users were particularly thorough in their analysis. Someone with video editing experience created a side-by-side comparison showing exactly which clips had been taken out of context and how the timeline had been manipulated. Another user enhanced the audio from the unedited footage, and you could actually hear the bloggers discussing how to frame their shots to make me look suspicious. The private chat screenshots were being shared everywhere. People were horrified to see how callously the bloggers talked about their subjects, and how they specifically targeted people they thought wouldn't be able to defend themselves effectively. The messages where they joked about their audience being gullible were especially damaging to their reputation. Within 24 hours, the bloggers had lost over 50,000 followers across their platforms. Brands that had been working with them started distancing themselves and canceling sponsorship deals. Their comment sections were flooded with people calling them out for their manipulation and demanding apologies to all the people they'd targeted unfairly. The bloggers tried to do damage control by posting a video where they claimed they were the real victims and that they were being harassed by an organized campaign to destroy their careers. They said the evidence against them was fabricated and that they were considering legal action against the people spreading lies about them. But nobody was buying it anymore. The evidence was too clear and too comprehensive for them to explain away. People could see the unedited footage with their own eyes and compare it to the manipulated version they'd posted. The private chat screenshots had timestamps and metadata that proved they were authentic. Other people started coming forward with their own stories about being targeted by these bloggers. Someone found a video where they'd filmed a teenager having what looked like a panic attack and made fun of him for being dramatic. Another person shared how the bloggers had recorded them during a difficult phone call and created a narrative about them being rude to customer service. The whole thing became a major story about the ethics of content creation and the dangers of believing everything you see online. Several news outlets wrote articles about the case and used it as an example of how easy it is to manipulate footage and create false narratives for social media engagement. When I got to work the following Monday, the atmosphere was completely different than it had been the week before. Sarah came over to my desk first thing and apologized for ever doubting my version of events. She said she'd seen all the evidence over the weekend and couldn't believe how thoroughly those bloggers had manipulated everyone. Mike stopped by later and said his girlfriend felt terrible about calling me a creep when she first saw the video. He told me that several people in his social circle had shared our evidence posts and were amazed by how deceptive the original video had been. Everyone was talking about how it made them question other viral videos they'd seen and believed without thinking critically about them. Even coworkers I barely knew were coming up to me throughout the day to say they'd seen the story online and were glad I'd been able to prove the truth. A few people said it had opened their eyes to how easy it is for content creators to manipulate situations and create false narratives about innocent people. My boss called me into her office around lunchtime, and I was worried that all the attention might be a problem for the company. But she actually wanted to commend me for how I'd handled the situation. She said she'd been following the story and was impressed by how methodically I'd gathered evidence and presented it in a way that was factual and professional rather than just emotional. She told me that the company had actually gotten some positive attention because of how the story played out. Several people had mentioned in their posts about the situation that I worked for a marketing agency, and some potential clients had reached out saying they were impressed by the strategic way the evidence had been released and wanted to work with people who understood digital communication that well. The rest of the week was much better than I'd expected. Instead of feeling like people were judging me based on a false narrative, I felt like I'd actually gained respect from colleagues and friends for standing up for myself and exposing the truth. Several people told me they admired how I'd turned such a negative situation into an opportunity to educate people about media manipulation. Jake texted me updates throughout the week about how the story was continuing to spread online. The bloggers had lost over 100,000 followers total, and several of their sponsorship deals had been canceled. They'd also been banned from the cafe where they'd filmed me, and the owner had posted a statement saying they wouldn't tolerate people who secretly recorded customers for content. I still felt stressed about the whole experience, and probably would for a while, but I was starting to feel like I'd actually won this battle. Instead of being remembered as the creepy guy from a viral video, I was becoming known as the person who exposed manipulative content creators and stood up for other victims of their tactics. A few months later, I was back at Brew and Bite for the first time since the whole incident happened. I'd been avoiding it for a while because of the bad memories, but eventually I realized that letting those bloggers control where I felt comfortable going was giving them more power over my life than they deserved. The barista recognized me when I walked in, but not from the viral video. She'd seen the news coverage about how I'd exposed the bloggers, and she thanked me for standing up to people who exploit others for content. She said they'd had problems with other content creators trying to film customers without permission, and my story had given them confidence to kick those people out when they saw it happening. I ordered my usual turkey and Swiss sandwich and sat at a different table than the one where I'd been secretly filmed. As I was eating, I reflected on how much had changed since that day in March when I first noticed those bloggers pointing their camera at me. The bloggers themselves had basically disappeared from social media. They'd lost most of their followers and sponsorships, and several other people had come forward with evidence of them manipulating footage in other videos. Last I'd heard, they were facing multiple lawsuits from people they'd targeted, and at least one news outlet was investigating whether they'd violated any laws with their deceptive practices. My own life had mostly returned to normal, but I felt like I'd learned some important lessons from the experience. I was much more skeptical of viral content now, especially videos that seemed designed to make people outraged at strangers. I'd also become more aware of how easy it is for people with bad intentions to manipulate footage and create false narratives. Several people had reached out to me over the months asking for advice on how to deal with similar situations. Apparently, there are a lot of content creators out there who target random people and turn them into villains for engagement, and my case had become a template for how to fight back effectively. I'd also started following some accounts that focus on media literacy and teaching people how to spot manipulated content. It felt good to be part of a community that was working to make people more aware of these tactics and less likely to fall for them in the future. As I finished my sandwich and prepared to head back to work, I realized that what had started as one of the worst experiences of my life had actually turned into something I was proud of. I'd managed to turn a situation where I was completely powerless into an opportunity to expose people who were hurting others and educate people about the dangers of believing everything they see online. Epilogue. It's been about 6 months since everything went down, and I'm doing well. The bloggers never recovered from the scandal, and their accounts are basically dead now. I heard through Jake that they're working regular jobs and staying off social media completely. I still get occasional messages from people thanking me for exposing those tactics and helping them recognize manipulation in other content they see online. It's weird being known for something like this, but I'm glad the story had a positive impact beyond just clearing my own name. My work life is back to normal, and I've actually gotten some interesting projects because of the attention the case brought to our agency. I go back to brew and bite regularly now, and I don't feel anxious about being in public spaces anymore. The whole experience taught me that sometimes the best defense against people who try to exploit you is to gather evidence and tell your story clearly and factually. I'm more confident now about standing up for myself when something isn't right, and I think that's probably the most valuable thing that came out of this whole mess.